Robert's going to start at 1 o'clock so that we have guests here that have to leave by 2, and we want to make sure that everybody stays for his complete hour. So he will be presenting, he and Carol, from 1 to 2. 2 to 2:30 will be book signing, so you could purchase books with Robert Teitelbaum and have him sign them here, and you could do some additional networking. And so for the next 20 minutes, we're just going to get our food, and then we'll start promptly at 1 o'clock with Robert. And again, I'm Josie Herndon, co-founder with my husband, Jim, of Addiction Therapeutic Services. And we are so honored to co-host this event with Benchmark is one of our sponsors. And so I'm going to have Nick talk a little bit about Benchmark.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Pre-Lesnick with the Benchmark Transitions. It's interesting going to events like this because we were a private pay facility for 20 years, family owned, and just recently in October of this last year, we were licensed by the state of California, so hopefully we're opening a new chapter that we're a little more ingrained with the rest of the programs here locally. For those of you that don't know us, we are a transitional facility, which is a niche market for 18 to 28-year-olds with failure to launch issues. The vast majority, this is not their first time at the rodeo, and they've been through quite a few treatment facilities. We're extended care, so we're a minimum 6-month stay. The majority that are with us manage to extend that stay while they're with us, but we also offer a graduate option. They're still living on our property. Independent living services where they actually transition to their own apartment, but they're picking which service they want to continue. I'm the director of educational services there, which after their 3-month program, most of them have been through college and they have not been successful at that, so we try to get them successful with some extra interventions, having them sign up for FERPA that we're communicating with professors. We do have some as well who have not finished their high school education, and through the local adult school, all of our credits transfer over to the adult school as well, as they're actually getting a WASC accredited high school diploma from us as well. A very interesting world, a transitional facility. We were lucky enough once we did get licensed that we were able to bring on Annette Hewlett as our Director of Utilization Review. I did you a little name dropping there because I knew that'd be very popular in this room. So Annette's made a lot of magic happen there, and we are very lucky to have this with being a newly licensed facility, to have Annette come in there and really turn the screws that need to be turned and clean things up as they need to be cleaned, because it's interesting. I've only been there 2 years, but to be a private pay facility for 20 years, then jump into licensing, there were a lot of growing pains, but we're very lucky to have Annette. And I thank you all for being here today, and a pleasure to co-host. So thank you all very much.
And now I'll say a few words about Addiction Therapeutic Services. For those of you who haven't come to tour, we invite you out. We're just on the other side of the parking lot behind the Wells Fargo at 559 South Palm Canyon Drive, Suite B 101. We're intensive outpatient, and we've been open for 2 years. We have our CARP accreditation, and now we're working on our Joint Commission over the summer. So we're very ambitious with our accreditations and getting in network with the insurance companies. We started out with averaging 8 to 10 clients, and today we have 26, so we're very excited, yay. And I think I know that the CARP accreditation has helped with that. So for those of you that aren't and you're thinking about it, it's definitely worthwhile. And most of my staff are here, a lot of them, so you can visit with them. We do accept most insurance and have affordable private pay rates. We have a clinical psychologist, an LCSW who's over there, Salim, and Dr. Ray Montella is our psychologist, and we have our program director, Jeanette, who's a KDAC, and we have two other KDACs. So we've got a pretty wonderful clinical team, and then Jim, my husband's an addiction PA, and he's opening up his private practice with Dr. Harry Hartunian this month. We've been working on that. We painted the office next door to mine. So this is, he'll be able to start treating clients that are referred to him for ambulatory detox maybe, or med management, evaluations, that type of thing. So we're excited about opening up his practice before our next luncheon. I hope we can announce that. It's been a long process. And our other sponsor is Millennium, and I don't think anybody's here from Millennium yet, so I'm not sure what happened, but...
I have text.
You do? Okay.
I'm going to be Seth.
Oh, Jim's going to be Seth. Good. He can talk about Millennium.
Hi, I'm Seth You guys all know Seth. He buys lunch every month. He comes down. He's a deep voice. He works for Millennium. He speaks for Millennium Health. They're a drug testing company. They also do genetic testing for antidepressants and antipsychotics. They've supported us through since we started. And anyway, Seth thought Mike was coming. Mike thought Seth was coming. So I texted him. I said I would speak for him, and he'd be excited to see all of you here. We have a full house. I'm excited to hear Carol and Robert speak today. They've been supportive of us throughout this process. It's been another great year. I got to do a 12-step call and take somebody to the hospital 2 days ago. It's the disease is out there and strong, and our job is to help people get better. Everybody in this room knows about that, and I want to welcome you all, and let's have a great lunch.
Thank you, Jim. Another thing about Millennium that some people don't know, but they are in network with the insurance companies, so I always like to mention that because it's been so helpful to us that the clients aren't getting large bills for their labs. Other announcements that you might have at your seat is next month. Save the date for May 15th, and this time we're moving it. It's called the Coachella Valley Network Luncheon, so we're actually maybe quarterly or twice a year we might expand it to the middle of the valley. And we're having at Omni Rancho Las Palmas Resort, which is next to the Betty Ford Center in Rancho Mirage, and Dr. Kevin McCauley will be our speaker. So we're excited about that. And that will be co-hosted with Northbound and his house and Millennium. So that'll be a nice day. And then we have an announcement. Jim's actually going to be speaking with Suzanne Jesse on May 2nd. And this is for the community, so anybody can go. And it's about anxiety. It's what you didn't know you needed to know. And Suzanne Jesse has her book and tapes, Escape Anxiety. So if you don't have this flyer, you might want to pick one up. And Jim and Suzanne will be speaking about other approaches to anxiety besides medication. So I think that's it. Now we're going to just go ahead. Oh, yes.
Hello. On Cinco de Mayo evening at 6:30, we will be at ATS, and it is a combination talk of Josie, ATS, and It Happens to Boys. And our group will be there. And this time we're turning the microphone on you. And instead of us speaking, we're asking for people to come and tell their own stories. So it'll be Tuesday, May 5th. A sober Cinco de Mayo.
Where's it going to be at, Carol?
At ATS.
Oh, here. Oh, is that our Tuesday night? Our first Tuesday
It's our
night?
first Tuesday night. It's free to the community.
Oh, sorry.
And our group will be there, and we want to hear your story. So we're going to turn the microphone on you, and please join us.
Oh, good. Maybe we'll have some Mexican.
Okay, that sounds like fun. And I am just so thrilled to have Robert speak today. I read his book and kind of cried for a couple days, but that was a month ago, so I'm better now. So if you haven't read it yet, it's just wonderful, and I'm it's such an honor that this is his premiere of speaking about his story in public. So Carol Teitelbaum's going to start the lecture for the continuing education, and then Robert will come up and talk a little bit more. So they've got it all planned out for us. And as most of you know, Carol Teitelbaum is a local MFT. She's got her private practice, and she's the founder of It Happens to Boys conferences of Creative Change. And I know, and she's got the women's conference now, so that's growing. And I think some of it was inspired by what you're going to be hearing today. And then, of course, her husband, Robert, is also co-founder of the Creative Change, and he's just been making a difference in so many human beings' lives, and I know that that's going to be the case with this book. And again, it's such an honor for me to have you guys here, and I love both of you dearly.
Me too. Hi. So Robert's book is one of family secrets: parental neglect, both emotionally and physically. It's a story of a boy's journey through the forest of dysfunction, abuse, denial, pain, and secrets. Being a man in our society translates into boys listening from the time that they understand language. Be a man, buck up, don't cry, don't feel, don't be vulnerable. Be protective of everyone around you. Protect yourself at all costs. So how does that affect a boy if something terrible happens to him? Do you think he's going to tell anyone? In our society, that means being a man. We have to change our definition of what being a man is. Being a man is not living in armor. Being a man is being able to be vulnerable and show your feelings and being caring and loving to your friends, your family, your children. It does not mean living behind a suit of armor and having no expression and no heart. There's a lot of men, unfortunately, walking around. I call them head on feet. But I know you can see in their eyes their pain. You can see when you look at them, the eyes are the windows to the soul. They are. And when I talk to them in my office, I see their pain. I see their fear. But do they say it out loud? No. Because if they say it out loud, that means I'm not a man. If I admit to those things, according to our society's definition, I'm no longer a man. When women are sexually abused, they feel like damaged goods. When men are sexually abused, they feel like not real men. Because a real man could protect himself. A real man wouldn't have let that happen. A real man doesn't have those things happen to them. So look at what's happening to our men. And it's really horrible. And we've been watching in our group that men have been changing, that they've realized now that all that is just bullshit. It is, because it doesn't work. You might protect yourself really well as a child and keep everyone at arm's distance, but you can't have an intimate relationship with someone when you've got armor on. You can't. They can't feel you. They can't reach you. Some of the men in our group have been married 45 years and they've never told their wife. One man, who's the father of one of our friends, he's 86. He's never talked about anything to his children. Every time they got near him, ask him a question, he'd go away. Don't bother me. I'm busy. 86 years old. And he got severe anxiety. And he had to be on medication. His son came to one of our conferences and saw our t-shirts. And those of you who've been to our conferences, you know we have size 8 to 10 t-shirts because most abuse happens at the age of 8 to 10. It's one of your CEU questions. So he told his father all about that. And he told his father, I know, Dad, I know something happened to you, I can tell. Won't you talk to me about it? Won't you tell me? He broke down, cried, and told him. 86 years old. And now he has a relationship and he has a dad at 86. And it's so wonderful. He's the youngest of several children, but he gets to have a dad finally. So let's look at the statistics. 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 4 boys are sexually abused by the time they're 18. That's pretty staggering. Not so long ago, it was 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys, and it's not going the right direction. Let's look at a scenario of what could happen. There's an 8-year-old boy. His mom is single. She's just gotten divorced. He has no dad. Dad doesn't show up. He's never been camping. He's never been fishing. And here's this man who's now mom's boyfriend. I really love your son. What a great young man he is. I'll take him camping. I'll take him fishing. I'll take him bowling. I really like your son. The son goes. Sometimes perpetrators take 5 years to groom their victim. The son goes. He has a great time. That man is like a father to him. He talks to him. He tells him how wonderful he is, how bright he is, how handsome he is. And then when he trusts him, he pounces on him. So if you're a parent and you've got somebody who wants to spend more time with your child than they do with anybody else in their life, please watch out. It's nice that there's good people who want to help children and help single moms, but if they don't have friends and they don't have anything else going on in their life, that's not a good sign. So now the boy's got these things, and what does he do? Now he's been molested, he feels horrible, he feels dirty, he feels shameful. Does he talk about it and be not a real man? Does he give up the camping and fishing that he really likes? The man didn't really hurt him. I mean, he didn't break anything or cut him or anything. It kind of feels good, but then when it's not happening, it feels really yucky. Now he can't let anybody look in his eyes. Now he can't talk to anybody about anything important. He's looking away, he's looking down, he's wearing big clothes, he's hunched over. He doesn't want to take a shower anymore. He takes a shower that's 45 minutes long. What happened to this boy? Shame, shame. It's a shame. He can't stand that he's not a real man. He can't stand telling someone that this happened to him. And he carries a secret for years and years and years until something happened that breaks it through. So everybody tells kids, watch out for strangers. Strangers are dangerous. Stranger danger. We've all heard that. It's not the strangers. It's not. 93% of perpetrators are someone the child knows. And most of the time, it's their own family members. And that's the most damage that's done to a child, is they can no longer trust anymore. Because if someone in your family who's supposed to love you and take care of you abuses you, who can you trust? And who can you tell? Who's going to believe you? Especially if a boy is abused by a woman, and yes, women abuse too. I've heard it so many times, well, how can a boy be abused? Yes, boys are abused, and women do abuse too. And if it's a woman, the boys get a high five and a congratulations. They don't get empathy for that. So it's so important that we start changing the messages about who boys are, what men are, and deal with the effects of what happens. There's so many effects. Health issues, rage, relationship issues, depression, suicide, drugs and alcohol. Not going to the medical doctor because they don't want to be examined. Not going to the dentist. Most people don't realize that survivors don't want to go to the dentist. That's a real trigger for them. It's way too vulnerable. And it's very costly to our society because of the rage. All these repressed feelings turn to rage. This road rage, domestic violence, harm to self and others. It's very, very costly. And sometimes when people won't deal with the emotional part of it, when they hear it costs them money, then they'll listen. So I'm going to turn this over to Robert. I think I answered all the CEU questions if I didn't see me later. And I'm so proud of you, Robert. This is his first time doing this in public. I mean, he speaks in public, but it's very different when it's your own story. So, Robert? You're up.
Hello, I'm Robert.
Can't see them.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I'll go over here so I can be out of the way. This is my father on the left and Al Capone on the right. And let's just go the wrong way. We'll go with here are three very powerful women in my family. My great-grandmother Frida is in the center. She was born in 1826, and by the time she was a young woman, she was getting terrible nightmares that the Cossacks were coming and going to kill all the Jews in the Pale States on Russia and Poland by fire. And she, by 1850, she had nagged her husband Wolf enough where he gave her, they were very wealthy, he gave her $50,000 in jewels and gold, secreted it in her luggage, and she made the trip across the ocean to New York. She settled in New York and went back. And she made 5 trips before 1903. 5 trips. She took every one of her children, their wives and husbands, their kids, all the way down to 4th cousins. all this before her her dreams would ever come true. She got everybody out of harm's way. And the last person to come was her youngest daughter, which was my grandmother, great-grandmother, Ida, on the left, and her daughter, Tilly. They brought with them Ida's husband, Tilly's husband, Herman, and Tilly's two brothers. And they, Ben and Felix. And also Tilly had a young son at that time, my Uncle Harry. And they arrived in 1903 on the ship, the Philadelphia, and Frida met them at the boat and took them into New York. My grandmother, Ida, didn't really like New York, and she felt that Chicago would be a better place to go. So she packed up the family and moved to Chicago. I had my two great uncle, Ben and Felix. They were kind of rascals already in Poland. They had been jailed a couple of times, and here they are again. On the left is my Uncle Ben, on the right is my Uncle Felix. While in Chicago, they were working for the outfit for Johnny Torrio. In 1914, they both were arrested, and they were convicted and given 20-year sentences. But really interesting is that, here, let me out. Bye-bye. And their criminal sentences had, before they were served, they got lost somehow. Apparently, a judge or someone was got to, the records were sealed, and they were let go, free. But they had been burning down things in Chicago for a long time. The Torrio organization took my Uncle Ben and sent him to college to be a lawyer. In 1918, he became one of Johnny Torrio's attorneys. My Uncle Felix, in the white suit, he was a projectionist. So he was sent to the mob in New York City to open up the projectionist union in New York. And when he was done with that, he came back to Chicago and opened the projectionist union in Chicago. This was my uncles on my mother's side. Now, my father's side also had a few people. And you can look at a young Joseph Rosen and Ben Siegel, very young. And in the center is my father's uncle, Harry Teitelbaum, next to Harry Greenberg and Louis Boatholder. So the influence were on both sides of my family. Here's my grandmother Tilly and Herman's. This is their home on Park Street in Chicago. This is 1924. By 1921, my grandmother had 10 children. My mother was the third of 10 children. Her older sister, who was born in 1903, my mother was born in 1905. She was Rosie was told that she was going to have to take care of her younger siblings, but she decided she wanted to get married and took off to San Francisco and married a man named Lud Passman. And my mother was next in line, so my mother was a stellar student all the way through school. She was always on the honor roll. But when she graduated high school, my grandmother said, "You're going to take care of your 7 younger children," for my grandmother. And excuse me for a second. I think I need a little water. A little dry up there. Huh? Thank you. But my mother was not real happy with this. She didn't want to be an indentured servant for my grandmother. And on the night of Yom Kippur, she was preparing dinner, and that was the last day that she could enroll at John Marshall Law School. So my mother just said enough. She took off her apron. She got dressed, took her transcripts, went out to the bus, gave the bus driver a nickel, and went over to John Marshall Law School into the administration office. and she signed up. But the problem was it was $4 a week to go to law school, and she didn't have it. That's a lot of money back in 1924. But the dean was there of the law school, and he said he looked at her transcripts and realized that there was someone very, very special in front of him because of her record. What he did, he offered her a clerk job and would pay her $6 a week, which was a good deal for my mama, and she took it. And let's take a look at Mom. This is my mother and my father. My mother went in law school at John Marshall in 1924. My father came from New York City. He was born in 1906, the same year as Benjamin Siegel. They were born in the same place, within 6 blocks of each other. Also, Al Capone was also friends of theirs. Maybe I can get away from the door. I'll switch sides before I get run over. Okay, this is good. My father came in 1924 to Chicago. Al Capone came in 1920, and Benjamin Siegel came in 1922. They were all, except for my father, they were escaping the police intentions of them. They had to get out of town. They hot-footed it out of town. My father left because of a arranged marriage, as he called it, that was unconsummated. But he left and he needed a place to stay. He tried to stay with my granduncle Abram Teitel in Chicago, but the place was full. There wasn't a place even on the floor to sleep. So they called and they found friends with Ben Milnick, and the family called, and all of a sudden my father shows up at my mother's doorstep and he stays. He moves in. My mother gets him gets through the paperwork, gets my father in John Marshall Law School in 1925. So my mom and Pop are in law school together. In my mom's second year of law school, she needed an elective. She had to take some sports, so she took up boxing. And for a small woman to take up boxing, and she always reminded all of us that she had a great overhand right. And she did. She never used it on the kids, but in purpose, she used it in her law practice, and she never left a stone unturned when she was an attorney, and did some really good things before she did some really bad things. The captain of the Chicago State University came to the house one Sunday, and he looked down his nose at my mother and said, "Girls can't box." And my father said, "Would you put $20 on that?" Which was a lot of money. And he said, "Sure." My mom broke out the gloves and gave him a 2-minute beating. At the end of it, she gave him a good overhand right and knocked him on his butt. And Pop took the $20 and took Mom out to a great dinner on Michigan Avenue, and still had about $8 left. So it was probably one of my father's first big time gambling experiences. But he knew my mom had a good left and a right. So Pop had my mom was the researcher, and my Pop had total recall. Anything he read, he could read it back to you verbatim, all over. I used to read Golden books to him, and then I'd say, "Hey, what's on page 13?" And he'd tell me word for word. But that was a Golden book. Imagine what he could do with the law. My mom would do the research. My Pop would go to court and win. At the same time, when Mom got out of college, she went into practice with my Uncle Ben. My Uncle Ben, the one that was the notorious fire starter, he was a terrible gambler. Ben was a terrible gambler, and what he did is every month my mother had to pay my Uncle Ben's bets. And that money at that time, because she joined the law firm and he gave her half, half of that money was my mom's, but she continued to enable him. And this went on for a long time. This is for like a year already. And my pop, he graduates and joins the law firm, and now it's in thirds. It's Melnick and Teitelbaum. And Ben loses $30,000 to the Capone mob because Torrio has already left the outfit because of he was shot 6 times, and he figured it was time to leave since they didn't kill him, and he turned the outfit over to Al Capone. Well, my grandmother and Teresa Capone, Al Capone's mother, were friends. They exchanged recipes to a point where my mom would had parties, dinner parties here in India. We lived on the Loveless Ranch when we moved here, and Governor Knight was there. And Governor Knight asked in front of a lot of people, a lot of political people, and a lot of friends were there, "How did you make such great Italian food?" And my mother said, "From Teresa Capone, Al Capone's mother." So my mother was able to start a very perfect sandstorm anywhere she was. But I'll go back to Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben lost $30,000. They were threatening to take my grandparents' home and their business away. My grandparents had that beautiful home on Clark, and my grandfather also had a Venetian blind company. Now, do you know how to make a Venetian blind? No, but he actually had a patent on it too, so they had an awful lot to lose. My grandmother called Teresa Capone, and they made a deal for my parents to become their lawyers. They would the $30,000 would go away. Ben would never come back from Toronto, and he never did until the 50s. But my mother and father, now Teitelbaum and Melnick, they became the Capone's family attorney for all the Capones. Let's see what's next. Here's my mother. When Capone had taken everything over, my family was doing it. He felt that he needed to promote his driver, Capone's driver, and his driver was later to me known as Uncle Louis, but this is Louis Romano on my mother's left. And he was Capone's driver for 3 years. And Louis loved the promotion. He gets away from a lot of gunfights and things like that. And he became my parents' bodyguard. At this time, my parents, this is right around the end of 28, the brand new Drake Hotel opened up, and my parents moved into one of the apartments, and they were there for 10 years. At the Drake Hotel in the apartments, Louis was in a smaller apartment next door to theirs. And my parents had protection all the time. Anytime they went out, Louis was there. They also bought a good piece of the Drake Hotel. Not the Drake Hotel, but the Fine Arts Building. The Fine Arts Building is a beautiful, beautiful building, 10 stories. From my parents, they had the top floor, and they also had the theater downstairs, and they had the stairway. That was what they owned of the Fine Arts Building. And it was a beautiful office that they had. It was the whole floor. Part of the floor was my mother's library that my father put together, which was a law library that would as good as any university's law library, except all the books were brand new that my pop bought for her, and my mother was the only one to do the research, and she did wonderful research for him. At this time, my father became the chief, through the outfit's help, became the chief counsel for the restaurant union in Chicago, which is a pretty heavy position. A little bit later on, he became the president of the restaurant union, and at that time he promoted Louis Romano again, and he promoted him to become the president of the bartenders union. So my father was actually controlling 2 unions at that time, basically for the mob. They were making a lot of money. Their retainer by 1929 was $125,000 a client, and they had a lot of clients. In fact, one of their clients was Moses Annenberg, And Reggie. Hello, Reggie. Here's my father with Capone's sister's husband, John. This is just a little quickie here. This is an unpublished photo. No one's really ever seen this. This is my father with Al Capone and Nitty. This is just a family one. And in 1932, my mom and Pop got married. They were together basically since 1924. You can't expect to believe that they were just study buddies. They were much more than that, but even for the times, it was a little, not kosher, so to speak. But they got along. Can I have some water, please? Thank you very much.
Share your water. There you go.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just consider it the water of the word.
My pop and mom, they were doing very, very well at this time. My mom was the hero of the downtrodden. What she felt is she felt a lot of empathy that the people in Chicago were starving at this time. So she basically nagged my father into getting all the clients to put up money to put up kitchens, soup kitchens, and help other people with monies during the Depression. So this made a lot of the gangsters look really good for the help that they were doing, putting up soup kitchens and things like this, and it helped my mother feel better about herself because she never wanted. She always wanted to stay in the background, but she wanted to help where she could. 2 years before this, my mother went to the Supreme Court and did the Chicago Land and Trust case, which she won. It means that you cannot be thrown out of your house without due process, and it was very good for the bankruptcies and things like this. So my mom did do a lot of good, but she was blind-eyed for anything my father did and anything anybody else of the clients. My father always said that even the worst of the worst should have the best representation that money could buy. Also that the lawyer with the best use of the language would always sway the jury or the judges. This is Ralph Capone. Ralph and my father became pretty good friends. My mom was getting upset with him because Ralph was picking him up a couple times a week. And this was for a long time. This was a habit that my father had for many years. Ralph would take him over to Cicero to a house of ill repute, and this went on for many, many years with my father, but my mother kind of, again, turned a blind eye. Number one, she loved my father, and she just didn't want to put up with breaking up a good team that was making an awful lot of money. This is 1935. Ben Siegel and my father. Ben and my father were friends, very good friends. And in 1935, Ben called my father and he asked my father, "I have a friend in Beverly Hills whose son cannot pass the bar exam, and he kind of looks like you." My father's 30 in this picture, and the kid that was needing to take the bar exam was only like 23 or 24 at the time. He had flunked it twice, and 3 times it would have been a charm for him, and he would never have been a lawyer. So my father went to California, went to Beverly Hills. He got all the information. He got to take his test for him, and he did. And this young lawyer wound up passing the bar, even though my father took the test. So he became a very political person. And in politics, he did very well. And later he was given a judgeship in California. And much later on, he became into one of the higher courts in the land in California. My father always said that it was always good to have politicians or a judge in your pocket because it was always good to have a person of that power in low places. Mickey Cohen came back out to California with Ben Siegel at that time, also to take over bookmaking, not bookkeeping, and they were doing an awful lot of business back then. Here's 1939. This is my father's telegram to the government, and he's paying off all of Al Capone's fines. And this is 1939. He paid off the fines, and he wrote on the checks and also in the telegram under protest. This is something my father always did. It was very natural to him to do this. Anytime he felt that he could have some recourse, he would put under protest, and then he'd give it to my mother, and my mother would do the research and get back money from time to time. This time they didn't get back any money, but Capone got out very quickly after that. Tony Accardo was upset with my father. Well, he really shouldn't have been, but this is what happened. Tony gives my father a check for $125,000 and tells him to hold it for a week and he'd pay him cash for it. 8 weeks later, my mother sees the check on my father's desk, and she cashes it. So the IRS goes after Ricardo, Tony, and it was not pretty. He put a hit on my father. Murray Humphreys, a great lawyer, interceded with Ben Siegel and my father. They had a sit down with Tony, and they reminded him that he just received $400,000 from their ventures in California, and this was because of Ben Siegel and my father. And all of a sudden the hit was taken off my father, and Murray Humphreys actually saved my father's life at that time. This is back in 1939. There was 2 years of terrible violence in the restaurant union. My father was not associated with them at that time. And what they did is they appointed him as labor relations counsel for the restaurant union, and within 2 weeks everything calmed down after 2 years of terrible violence. Apparently my father knew how to grease the squeaking wheel. This is a birth gift given to me. First of all, my brother was born in 1938 at the Drake Hotel. They moved in and he was colicky, and the people asked him to, my parents, if they would move out because Albert was making too much noise. So my parents immediately found a client that needed a lot of money, and they had a beautiful house on Hawthorne Place in Chicago proper, and they bought the house for $20,000. Surprisingly to me, that happened that way. Can I have a little more water, please? Thank you. So they had this beautiful house on Hawthorne Place, 3 stories. The top story was a music room, and it had marble floors and beautiful acoustics, and it had a beautiful double Steinway piano. And the Chicago Symphony, the string section, and a piano player would come over on every Tuesday and Wednesday and play up there because of the great acoustics. They were rehearsing, and our house was always full of beautiful music. This, here it is. Here's my sister, Siley. She was, Celeste. Was born in 1941. My sister Ann was born in 43 on July 4th. I was hoping that she could be here today with us because she was in the same concentration camp that I was, unfortunately. And the truth of it is, I wish she would be here. She read my book about 4 months ago, and she's changed now. She is no longer angry anymore because she was able to see exactly what happened in writing, and I'm very proud of my sister for making that change. And then I was born in September 22nd, 1945. This is a birth gift given to me. Capone wasn't coming up to Chicago very often, but he did come up in November before Christmas of '45. And he brought this to my parents. My parents secreted these cufflinks in the bottom of a music box that was given to me, and I discovered them underneath the music box by the time I was 4, and I've always had them in my possession. I actually have them with me today, and I'll show them to you. But I honestly feel that it was a pretty sad thing to give a child an initiation gift like this to a newborn baby, because these are not cowboy pistols. These are 38 with 6-inch barrel. This is what they were copies of, with revolving cylinders and pearl handles. It really was not something that was good to give. This is Chicago. My two sisters and myself and Mary. Mary was one of the. We had an awful lot of servants and people that worked with us and governed us. We had cooks. We had a lot of people around. We had my mother's 8 sisters and 2 brothers, aunts, uncles, and during this is right after after the war. So I wasn't a boomer. I was between August and December. This was a little gap that I always thought was left by a special little group. But then I find out from 1925 to 1945 we are called the Silent Generation, because we kept our mouth shut and we joined the services and we died for our country and went out and worked until we passed. This is me and my cousin Roger. Now Roger is still a dear cousin of mine. In fact, all my cousins. I have 23 of them, and we're all very, very close still. But a lot of them would come to the house and live with us while they were getting out of the services and going into business. My parents were good providers, so they did help, and with that help, they were able to start businesses and things like this. But I could swim before I could walk. Not here. We also had an indoor pool at this location on Hawthorne Street. But this is the galvanized steel bucket that all the kids used to splash on in the front yard. It was kind of fun. And before this, I'll go back one. That Christmas of 45, before this was taken, there was a party at the house for a Christmas Eve, and my aunts, 2 of my mother's youngest sisters, brought a friend over. Her name was Roxanne. Roxanne was 17 at the time, and they were in an alcove at the house, and everything was there. I mean, it was like a Rockwell painting, as it described to me by my aunts and my mother and everybody else. And they were sitting in the alcove and they were playing a game. What would I get if I could wish for something it would be given me right now? And everybody was wishing for this and that. And when it came to Roxanne, she put her hands out and looked at my mother and father standing, holding me. And she says, "I want this." And my Aunt Hannah immediately said, "So you want a nice house and you want friends and family around you?" She says, "No, I want this." Now, we had to leave Chicago in '46. My father people were shooting at him and things like this. This is what we were told. But my father was already basically wanting to start another family. So we were sent to Palm Springs. My father, a year and a half later, Roxanne got her wish as she moved into our Hawthorne Street house with my father. She had 5 children, and my father basically was a polygamist for 33 years. It's hard for me to say that. Until Roxanne killed herself just before her 50th birthday. And here's 2 families that really loved my father that were both being betrayed by him. Here we are. Anyone know the street Tamarask here in town? Recognize this house? Still there. My father bought this house and the house directly across the street, so we would have 13 bedrooms for our relatives and the kids, and we had lots of. We had 2 limos, we had 2 chauffeurs, we had bodyguards, we had a lot of people that were staying with us, and it was too small. It was too small for my family. Starting in 1946, when we first got to Palm Springs, it was too hot during the summer, so we stayed at the Beverly Hills Hotel in the Cabanas, and we did this until 1953. And we stayed at the Beverly Hills Hotel. We stayed there 3 years, and then 2 years we had a house on Beverly Drive, 711 Beverly Drive, where we stayed, and we rode out 6 weeks of the summer and came back in the middle of September every year. So we were here, and it was too small, so this is Walter Kirshner. Anybody know who Walter Kirshner is out here? Ever heard of him? He built the Tower Ranch, which is where Roosevelt and Patton stayed during the war when they were here planning strategies. It's a big tower. It's in way back in La Quinta, and it still has the huge tower. But he also built another one because Roosevelt said he didn't want to live in Palm Springs because he didn't want people to see him where he couldn't walk and people had to carry him because of the polio or be taken in and out of his car. He wanted to be somewhere secluded. So Walter Kirchner built a 10-acre ranch with a 3-acre compound that had 11-foot high walls, totally secure, a 5-room house outside of that property for the Secret Service, also enclosed this was a wood wall, but not the brick and mortar wall that surrounded the property. My mom is in the center. Joe Ithaca is on the left in the back. He was from Chicago. He was part of the mob. The man in the center between my mom and one of my aunts, this gentleman owns Voight, and his family still owns Voight. You know who Voight is, the basketball company and all that? My grandmother, my grandfather, and my Aunt Rose, who my Aunt Josephine went to up there to visit during a very crucial time. Now this is also my father in front of the racket committee. He didn't get along with Robert Kennedy because before he was called to the racket committee, he told Kennedy that if he brings him forward, that he will tell everybody about his father Joseph, because he knew him during Prohibition and also the other rackets that Joe Kennedy was in. And this is really a hard thing for me to even think about, that my parental pot was calling the Kennedy kettle black. And my father didn't get a lot of points for this. There was mayhem in Chicago. My people were trying to kill my father. This needle-nosed Laboria and Jimmy Weinstein were overheard because the police had bugged their office, and because these guys were up to real no good. They were going to kill my father and take over the restaurant union, and also I believe they were going to kill Louis Romano too. But they didn't get a chance. The cops immediately came to my father and told him what happened and who these people were. And it was not a good thing for them, because they did arrest them, put them in jail. When they made bail, they never were heard from again. In 1954, about 3 months later, they were found stuffed in the back of a car. And they were poisoned, strangled, and shot. Here's 1947, happy family. Notice there's addition to the family. There's myself, my sister Ann, and Celeste, and new baby Linda. She was conceived at the Beverly Hills, one of the cabanas, and here she is. She's pretty young. She's 13 months younger than I was. And oh, here's me. I just was coming home from Uncle Ben's toy store in Beverly Hills. Has anyone ever heard of this place? Uncle Bernie's. It used to have a lemonade tree, and kids used to flock from all over to go there. And that was one of my new toys. But here's my mom and pop. Before this picture was taken, because this is in December, Al Capone was died. My father had to go back to Florida to help with some arrangements. After about a couple months later, my father gets a call from Al Smiley that, now this is what happened. Ben Siegel was staying with us at the ranch for 5 days. He was in a secret room that we had by the chauffeur's quarters, between the chauffeur's quarters and the maid quarters. And Al Smiley went and picked him up and took him back to Virginia's house in Beverly Hills, and he was murdered. Al Smiley was sitting next to him when he was shot, and Virginia was upstairs in her bedroom, safe out of the way. We had a limo every 2 years. We got a new limo. The 11-foot high walls were to keep other people out, and it kept some people in. I wish those walls were never there. This is the house in Indio. My mother's bedroom was on the far side. It was a 40 by 40, had a 20 by 20 library and a 20 by 20 bathroom and the bathroom had a tub with 3 steps down for Roosevelt's use. Roosevelt died before he took possession of this property, and Eleanor came and spent 3 weeks, and she said it was too damn hot, and she was with 2 of her grown sons, and they left. Eleanor went back to New York to Valkill, and the sons stayed in California. Later became politicians here in the state of California. The living room was a 66 by 44. The had 2 fireplaces. It had a bar that in the glass was etched FDR. It had a kitchen that could easily feed 100 people. It also had 5 other bedrooms that were 20 by 20, so nice bedrooms and things like that. This is all inside of the 11-foot high wall. This is the pool house. It was a 1,500 square foot pool house, and had an Olympic-sized pool. Most of the kids were any of the people here here from 48 to 55, because if you were, you would have learned to swim in our pool, because there was no public swimming pools on that side of the valley. In fact, there is someone here that I'd like to acknowledge, Rena Rodman. She was working in a ribbon store, and we would show up in our limousine every week and buy ribbons for my sisters. And she used to pick me up and hold me so I wouldn't wreck the joint. Thank you, Rena. I love you. So we went to the Date Festival also. This is my dog, Nikki. Let me go back because I missed a slide. I wanted to finish telling you the story. One more. Sorry about that. I get lost. One more.
Rita wants to know the house is on Madison Avenue.
Madison, that was it. They tore it down. They were going to build a jockey club there when the Historical Society couldn't do it anymore. My mother and father, Capone's dead, Ben Siegel's dead. My father gets a call from Al Smiley that he has a horse he wants to bet. And the truth of it was he didn't want anybody to know it was he making the bet, so he asked my father to make the bet. And he wanted $1,000 in the horse's nose. My father, if he was in for a penny, he was in for a pound. He said, "Can I bet it also?" So what he did is he called the first book, and the book said, "It'll take me a while to get this down. I'll call you back once it's down." And my father waits a half an hour. All of a sudden, he's calling lots of other books, and they're all telling him the same thing. So my father doesn't think he's going to get a bet down. But what happened is about a half hour before the race, all the books called him and to let him know. My father had $40,000 on this horse's nose. Well, to my father, it wasn't an awful lot of money because he was making an awful lot of money from his clients. But the horse won. Al Smiley got his $8,700 for his $1,000, and my father got $430,000. So my father, this is just before Christmas of 47. So my mother and father get on the train and with Louis Romano and another bodyguard, and they go around the country. They're gone for a month and a half. My little sister Linda dies from the bird flu. There was a terrible bird flu in this valley at the time, and how I remember it is that one of my aunts, one of my mother's youngest sisters, picked me up and shook me when from a dead sleep. I was really asleep, and she shook me and she was screaming at me that Linda was dead. I couldn't comprehend this, but what she did say is, "It should have been you." And this is something that has always hurt me, and I have always thought about this, and that you can never unring a bell. So I'll go forward, and I understand I got to be a little quicker, so I shall. And had a pony. This is me at the Riverside County Date Festival. In '51, I got to meet Bob Hope. We used to have dinner with him many years later at Sorrentino's because he used to be there every Saturday night, and so did Carol and I. My dog Nikki came with us from Chicago. And here's the similarity. I figured this out, that things were going really wrong between my father and mother. And it says, Dad, I'm considering a career in organized crime, and Pop's saying government or private sector. But this is what I was thinking. I was 9 years old, and my father had cut off money, and we were in dire straits. We were keeping up the ranch. My brother and I were keeping up the ranch. My sisters were cleaning up the inside. We lost everybody that was working from us, from the maids to the cooks to everybody else. All 10 ranch hands. We were doing all the work. I stopped really doing schoolwork at that time. I became a class clown. And I always figured that if I could make money as being a mobster like my father, that my mother and my sisters would have never had the abuse and everything that happened to them, and myself, and that I could have taken care of them. Here's a who's who. These are my father's clients. And this is a who's who of the mob in New York, in Chicago, and also in the West Coast. And these are my father's clients, all the way down to a bunch of them. My father died in 1990. Pastrami killed him. He ate two pastrami sandwiches and a herring appetizer. Got on a plane and he died over Albuquerque. I had to go pick him up in Albuquerque with my half sister. And here is the perpetrator. Now, this is the part I'm going to have to read because I do get triggered and I don't want to. So I'll just read this part. And things aren't always what they seem. There are children who live in ideal settings in beautiful homes with all the trappings, the envy of everyone they know, who have successful parents that are extremely popular where they live. What looks so good on the outside is often the sickest on the inside, but no one knows, and the children will not tell. This is my story. My parents abandoned their parental duties, leaving their children in long-term care of anybody who was around. My aunts, people who worked for us, governesses that didn't do good jobs, and also in the long-term care of a sadistic, abusive bodyguard, you can see him right there, who terrorized my siblings and myself for over 10 years. This is when the chaos in my life started. I was mentally, spiritually, physically, and sexually abused, starting when I was just 4 years old, by the bodyguard. My family's bodyguard continued this abuse until I was 14 when we moved to Beverly Hills. We had to move in with my grandparents because the house was taken away for taxes. My father had a lot of problems with taxes. My mother kept him out of trouble, even though they weren't together. What she would do the research for him, so he would stay a little while at the ranch, and we liked that, him to be at the ranch. But my mom and pop were still sleeping together. When he was there, he'd be there for 5 days, they'd be sleeping together for 5 days. So my father was basically cheating on the second family with the first family. And then he'd leave. And he'd leave my mom an envelope, and I always felt he should have left it on the bureau like he did at the houses of ill repute, because he wasn't doing anything other than just being a rascal. My family's bodyguard, okay, I read that. I left Beverly Hills High School in the September of my junior year. I was just 17. I joined the Marine Corps. 2 years later, I married my wife, Carol. This September, we're married 52 years. Thank you. I have a lot of time to reflect back on my last 69 years. I have now been in recovery for 6 years. I know the damage and the baggage I've accumulated hurting myself and my family. Like most men, I thought I could stuff my feelings and file them away forever. Just never works. The trauma and abuse I stuffed so long ago as a child caused me to rage. My experience is one of broken promises and dreams that led to the use of drugs and alcohol. I could snap and hurt feelings in less than a second. I would use drugs and alcohol to numb the pain. I would block out all my feelings and become absent from my wife and my children. I would break a phone or toss a typewriter and meet with despicable or shady types who I thought were friends, who clung to me as if I knew what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just totally out of control. The drugs and alcohol were never enough. I could never allow anybody to see the real me, as I had disappeared when I was a child from being abused. I was a total train wreck inside. I was successful in business and sabotaged my success by listening to the old tapes in my head. You're worthless. You don't deserve anything good. And my aunt saying, it should have been you. Anytime things would trigger me without even thinking, I would revert to drugs and alcohol. I was turning into someone I didn't ever wanted to be, my absent parents. My wife Carol always knew about the abuse I had suffered from even before we were married. With much love and her gentle nudging and sometimes an elbow, I finally got help. Recovery from child abuse is much like recovering from drugs and alcohol. It must be done one day at a time. Let the truth be known, no one has ever recovered. We are all just recovering. I still get triggered by demonic memories periodically, but now I have the tools to deal with those demons. The survivor of child sexual, emotional, and physical abuse often starts off as a healthy child, full of energy, playfulness, a good student who looks clean and presentable, only to turn into someone who cannot tolerate painful feelings. They often stop caring about sports, their homework, they change hygiene habits, become withdrawn, or the class clown, and later sexually shut down as adults or promiscuous. If my story is all helpful, your own stories will not have to wait 68 years in the telling as mine did. And always remember, it was never your fault. It was never your fault. And thank you so very much.
Okay, we have a raffle. Forgot about that. We have a $25 gift card to Panera. Pick this up for those that are still here.
Oh, don't leave, we have a raffle.
Yeah, okay, so Ross, do you want to pick the card?
Looks good.
Leonard Michelle. Is Leonard still here? Where's Michelle? Where's Leonard Michelle?
I think he was outside.
See if he's out there. We can get. He's with Riders in Treatment.
These were people I wouldn't say millions for charities. We're doing all these good deeds.
Okay, we're going to draw another name. You have to be present too. Thank you. We don't have our readers. Blue Tiger. So from Blue Tiger.
Solomon.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean,
Here?
he's out.
All right, let's go.
That was terrifying.
Michael Mandino.
Michael, he just left. Michael,
Is he
there he is right there.
Oh, good. We'll give it to Michael. Okay. Michael Mandino is our winner. And remember, May 15th is our next luncheon. And for those of you that are still here, we are doing a spiritual retreat tomorrow at Cielo, the Women's Sober Living of Michelle. So if anybody's interested, Michelle, myself,